Well, here with me now is Chuka Umunna, Labour's Shadow Business Secretary. Good evening to you.
Evening, Evan.
I'd like to talk about the finances. I'd also like to talk about the jobs market. Let's start on the jobs market, 0 hours and all that. Look, if you had rather constrained choices and you had to choose between no job or a 0 hours job, or an exploitative 0 hours job, which would you choose?
Well, of course, any job is better than no job, but we're more ambitious for the British people. And one of the problems that we've got is that the nature of work that many of your viewers have been doing over the last 4 or 5 years has been incredibly insecure. 0 hours contracts have become quite emblematic of that. And just to put it in context, when you're on a 0 hours contract, you don't know when the next shift is going to come and therefore whether you're going to be able to put food on the plate for your family. And just think about the complications that creates in terms of being able to get a mortgage. Now, there are many employers who could put people on 0 hours contracts but choose not to, as does a good example Brompton Bicycles. I often see people coming in and out of the BBC with their bicycles, choose not to have those kind of contracts because they think that is the wrong way to treat their employees, their workers. Now, what we're going to do in the first Queen's speech is act to outlaw the forms of these contracts that have been used to exploit people.
That's where somebody does regular hours, but are always on a 0 hours contract. You're just going to say, look, if you do all those regular hours, you're on a proper regular hours contract.
Yes, if you've been on that for more than 12 weeks. But don't forget, I mean, sometimes people turn up to do a shift and then it's cancelled at short notice.
Of course, it's not all bad. It's not all bad. I mean, and sometimes you do know when your shift is. Sometimes it's not.
It's the exploitative forms that we want to get rid of. And let's just be clear. I mean, as ever, I mean, the package was quite interesting, actually. This election is about choices. And no other party is proposing to do what we're doing in terms of clamping down on these exploitative 0 hours contracts.
The Conservatives might say no other party, or not your party, can credibly pledge to create 2 million jobs over a five-year period. You've got to hand it to them. Something went right in the labour market in terms of quantity over this last 5 years, didn't it, or not? Am I wrong?
Well, what I would say is that actually, in spite of the very choppy waters that we have faced, Conservative economic policies leading to a reduction in demand, our British businesses, who are just fantastically diverse, innovative and determined, they are the ones who've been powering the recovery that we've seen. So they are the ones I would credit with this. And I have to say,
because the public sector shrank and the private sector
private sector did step in and do its bit. So ultimately, it's our great British businesses, our entrepreneurs, our wealth creators, the buccaneers out there.
But how do you explain it, though? Because you didn't think it was going to happen. At the beginning of the Parliament, there was tremendous scepticism about how many jobs would be created. You didn't predict it,
Well,
did
the point
you? You didn't think it was going to happen.
Of course, when the Parliament started, people often forget, employment was growing, a recovery was beginning to bed in. But then, in anticipation of perhaps the most extreme and austere budget many people had seen in a generation, you saw the economy react against that demand drop. So what followed? Very little growth over the course of 4 or 5 years. Worry, hardship for so many people that was unnecessary.
You can apologise because your party did say that the private sector will never be able to pick up the slack if the public sector loses jobs.
We didn't say that there would never be job growth.
Okay.
But I think what many economists were arguing, and you of course used to be the economics editor of this programme after all, was that you weren't giving enough time for the job creation to bed in on the private side because there wasn't enough demand.
So,
and actually, that proved to be right.
It turned out better than you thought. It did turn out to be better than you thought in terms of quantity.
I'm not sure I would say that, but one thing I say, look, in the constituency I've been representing, and I've been privileged to represent in Streatham over years, look, I'm very pleased that we've got more people in work now than, say, 2 or 3 years ago. But it's the quality of that work that we now need to look to improve. And it breaks my heart when I have people coming to my surgeries just often sick with worry about what is going to happen.
A couple of quick ones. No 0 hours contracts in the public sector if you win the election?
We haven't said that because, well, for example, in the NHS, you have some nurses. Yeah, exactly. So for some people, these things can work. But the issue is when the burden of all the risk and uncertainty is dumped on the side of the employee, and that's not fair. And you've always got to get a balance in these things, I think, and we've got to be more ambitious. As I said, I mean, it's good that more people are in work. I'd be really churlish and, you know, kind of yard-booed, Punch and Judy of me to say, oh, that's a terrible thing. But we've got to be more ambitious. We know this economy, Evan, is not working for enough people. On average, people are now earning £1,600 less than they were people in work than they were in 2010.
Let's not get into the stats. We've had so many of these things bounced around.
Well, the next time you pose a stat to me, I'll say we ignore it. But anyway,
let's talk about spending. Let's talk about spending and borrowing and the Labour plan.
Yeah.
The Conservative Party have talked about a 30 billion fiscal tightening that they're going to engage in. It's over a particular period, a particular way you've measured it, but they've given us broad aggregates as to how they'll get there. What is the equivalent Labour figure to that 30 billion?
Well, I can't give you that equivalent Labour figure, and I'll explain why. Because we think you have to deal with your debt and your deficit. Look, there's nothing progressive about spending more on your debt repayments than you do, say, on housing or infrastructure. But how you go about reducing your debt and your deficit is a big question. And we think there's three ways of doing that. One, you've got to get people's wages up, which is why we're going to get the national minimum wage to £8 by the end of the next Parliament and encourage more people to pay a living wage. Two, of course, there will be spending reductions. That's an important
There will be
part.
spending reductions.
There will be spending reductions.
Okay.
And hang on, you'll probably come back to me on that.
You've already answered the question partly. Good.
And of course, there's a third part of that, is that people have done very well and are making lots of money. Good luck to them. But I think it is fair to ask them to make a bit of a bigger contribution. Right. Hence our bank bonus tax, bankers bonus tax, and also taking the top rate back up to 50p.
When it comes to the spending cuts, to coin a question that has been used already, is it that you don't know what the cuts are going to be, or is it that you're not telling us what your plan is?
Well, it's not that we're not telling people.
So you don't know what it is.
Let me level with you. We haven't seen the books, which is
one thing. The OBR produced the books. Everybody's doing it on the basis of the OBR book.
We haven't seen the books.
Well, I've got one upstairs. I could get for you.
We don't.
Of course, you've seen.
We don't know. We haven't seen all the books. You don't know that until you get. You don't know that until you get to government.
No, that's why we have an OBR.
Not even you know everything that George Osborne knows as a Chancellor of the Exchequer, partial to all the figures of what's going on in the different departments. But the other thing is, Evan, by the way, is that we don't know what the state of the economy is going to be and growth. But
that's why we always, with respect, the way these things are now done, it's a really useful way of having a conversation, is that we take the Office for Budget Responsibility figures, we take them, and then we ask everybody to base their things on that. Now, you're entitled to say, we don't believe those figures, but Evan, you're not saying that. You're saying you don't know what the figures are.
Evan, you've made the point on this programme that the Office for Budget Responsibility's forecasts aren't always correct, and they don't always represent.
Is that your claim, that you don't know because the OBR are wrong? No, because the OBR are going to be producing the figures for you when you're in government.
I suppose what I'm saying to you is, in some respects, we've been asked to set out a level of detail which can give me an indication as to what will be
I'm not asking for detail. I just want a broad figure. Within 5 billion. Within 5 billion.
I can't give you a broad figure, but we have set out a number.
What's wrong?
We have set out, let me finish my sentence. We have set out, for example, in the Department for Community and Local Government's budget, we reckon that we can make £500 million worth of savings there. We reckon we could make £60 billion worth of savings in the defence budget, £70 billion worth of savings in the courts budget. If we abolish these ridiculous police and crime commissioners...
You don't mean 17 billion in the courts.
70
million, you mean?
70 million, what did I say? Billion. Sorry, 70 million. There's 230 million you can take out of the Home Office budget because of police and crime commissioners.
What's the point in giving us all these little pieces? I mean, I think the Conservatives are criticised because they've given us the big figures and none of the detail, but at least they've given us the big figures. I mean, I think you're giving us tiny little bits.
But the point is, you set out your direction to travel, which we have. I didn't mention, by the way, capping child benefit 1% increase over the first 2 years of the Parliament. But as I said, of course, when you get in, you see the books and you have a better understanding.
Or you go upstairs and I'll lend you one before.
Well, I've just given you quite a long list, Evan.
Isn't the truth that you're just somewhat embarrassed to say, look, guys, Labour will borrow more than the Conservatives, and we will spend more than the Conservatives. Everybody knows that. I mean, Oxford Economics produced a rather good report. They actually commend your policy because they think it's sensible to be less austere than the Conservatives. They say you'll, on their projection, you'll be borrowing 32 billion in 2020.
But the point is, Evan, to go back to my original point, I think principally there is a difference in the sense that the Conservatives, no, there will be no, let me be clear about this, there will be no commitments in our manifesto when we publish it in full, the whole one, that entail additional borrowing. But the point that I made to you to start off with, look, I'm not going to deny that we have a different position to the Conservatives. Because the Conservatives,
one that means borrowing more. This is the point, doesn't it?
No, listen, let me finish my sentence as I keep saying. And then
say whether it involves...
But the point is, principally, the Conservatives see reducing the deficit as coming from public spending cuts. But what I'm saying to you is that from our point of view, you do that three ways. Okay. You get the rich to make a bit more of a bigger contribution. You get wages up. And then, of course, there are spending cuts too.
We'd all love wages to be up to. Chuka Umunna, thanks very much.
Thank you.